and welcome to Pulling Focus, a podcast that shines the light on workers within the film industry. I'm your host, Erica Joy Brunner, and today I have the privilege of being joined by John Cantine. John has worked as a director, writer, and editor on short films as well as an independent web series. To add to that, he's currently a senior lecturer and the Director of Undergraduate Studies in Production within the University of Pittsburgh's Film and Media Studies program. Thanks for joining me. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine. Thanks for having me on your podcast.
Of course. We'll start out with an easy question.
Okay.
What piqued your interest in film?
Okay, that's a really good question. I mean, I've always been interested in TV. I watch TV as everyone watches TV, watch movies. But I went to school in my undergraduate program as a creative writer. Mm-hmm. So I wrote short stories, and I didn't like the internal voice and the narration and so on in short stories. So I started writing stories that were just basically action and dialogue, and then I realized I was writing scripts. So I started taking a couple of courses on film at a place called Pittsburgh Filmmakers, where you could just take a course. You didn't have to, go through a program. And around that time, Metropolis was re-released, the Fritz Lang movie, which I loved, and that kind of was the moment where I said, oh yeah, images can be more effective than words. Maybe I should be doing this. And then I went to grad school. So,
great answer. So when you started out in the film industry, what did you work as?
The first stuff I did when I got out of grad school, obviously in grad school, I was sort of a filmmaker. In fact, I was an experiment. There was a finger quotes. You can't hear them on the podcast. In fact, I was an experimental filmmaker for at that time. But when I came back to Pittsburgh and I started working for people who would pay me, I had actually worked as a 35 millimeter projectionist at a movie theater while I was to help pay for grad school. So I got a job as dailies projectionist. This was the moment when a lot of film productions were first coming to Pittsburgh. There weren't a lot of. They actually made me a projection booth out of plywood in a hotel room. That was how new things were. So they didn't have a lot of people who were willing to sit around a hotel room till 3 a.m. when the shoot was done and then show them the previous day's rushes. So that was my first job. I also got a little set PA work. I did some audio on some smaller projects, and that's sort of where that went from there.
Mm-hmm. So what led to you becoming a professor?
Well, so I took some classes at Pittsburgh Filmmakers, as I said, and a couple of the classes that I took were taught by the director of the school there. And then I went to Ohio University and went to grad school, did some projection work, and I was literally working in the projection booth getting ready for a movie that night, and I got a call at my work, which was weird enough, and because this was pre-cell phone days, and it was the head of that school, and he said, I got the impression when you took my class that you would actually be interested in teaching. And I thought, I don't remember giving that impression. And then he said, do you want to teach a class for us? And I thought, Pittsburgh was pretty much the one place I didn't want to go after grad school, but let's not burn any bridges. So I said, yeah, I'd be interested in teaching a class. And he said, would you be interested in teaching a class next week? Because he was desperate to find someone had bailed on him, and that's why he was going through numbers of old students to find people. So I said, sure. And I figured I would teach for that summer. I would get some experience, and that would be that. And 30 years later, I was still working at that same place. So,
jeez. For my last question, I was wondering, what advice do you have for people who want to start working in the film industry?
Okay. This is not going to be a short answer.
Okay.
But first of all, I think the first thing is don't blinker yourself. Don't narrow your focus too much. A lot of people think that the first thing you have to do when you get out of school is become a set PA, and carry a walkie-talkie and get yelled at. Only become a set PA if you're sure you want to work on set. There are lots of other things you can do. I always tell people, whenever a film goes on location, outside of LA especially, they're going to open a production office. And every single person goes through the production office, from the producer to the lowest PA. And if you can get yourself a job as an assistant in the production office, you are going to meet everyone, you're going to network with everyone, and you're already sitting in a room with the people who run the logistics, the line producer, the ADs, the people that kind of make the film run. So they're also the people that can have the most weight in whether you get hired on the next job or not. And you also get a look behind the scenes. So there are, people tend to think of, no one ever thinks of sound, but I will say this: if you become a sound recordist, and you get good gear and you're good at what you do, you will never not work a day in your life. People always need sound recordists. Every market I've ever seen, it's hard to find someone to do sound. People are desperate. So, because everyone wants to do camera. If you want to do camera's great. It's hard because everyone wants to do it. It's kind of the glamour job. Directing, everyone wants to do it. There's no career ladder to become a director. It's really hard to make that. You pretty much have to make your own stuff and get it seen by the right people. So look at the jobs that are not as well known, especially the jobs in the sort of production area, because those are where film students don't typically look, so you have less competition, and you end up being the person who hires the camera people for later productions. Mm-hmm. So yeah, step one, think of stuff you didn't think before. Step two, make stuff. If you want to be a TV writer, first of all, get an agent. But secondly, maybe make a web series with your friends that has some cool ideas that maybe some people see, and you show that you can tell an episodic story with no resources. If you want to be a feature filmmaker, probably don't make a feature film, but make a short film. Just get stuff done, make yourself real, show people what you can do. And then the third thing is just never miss a chance to network. Students especially, tend to think of networking up, like you go to LA and you meet some important people and you try to impress them. I once saw a student at the head of Netflix programming was doing a speech, and a student stood up and said, "Here's my resume, would you look at it?" And the guy very politely, very nicely said, "I'm not the person who hires where you are right now. I'm not the person who hires you. I'm the person who hires the people who hire you. Giving me your resume will do you no good at all." Similarly, you need to network sideways, right? Especially if you're in film school, you have a lot of people, you should be surrounded by people who want to go to the film industry. Some of them are going to. Some of them are going to get jobs. Some of them are getting hired. Some of them are going to make their own productions. And they're going to look to the people they trust the most, which theoretically would be you. And if one person gets an opportunity, then a lot of people come with them. So always think of networking with your peers, peer-to-peer networking, rather than simply, begging people who are already in the industry to notice you, because they're not gonna, probably. So those are sort of a couple of just general rules, I think, that will help you moving forward.
That was some great advice. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to talk with me today. It was really a pleasure.
Well, thank you. I'm glad I could be part of this.